Ladies and gentlemen, when you strip away the noise of society, the filters of social media, the masks men wear to appear stronger than they are, you find something raw, something fragile, and something deeply human: pain. Every man in this room has carried it, whether he admits it or not. Some of you carry it quietly, with the straight posture of someone who pretends nothing touches him. Others carry it loudly, letting anger, alcohol, distractions, and shallow validation scream louder than the truth you refuse to face. But pain is not the enemy. Pain is the starting point. Pain is the raw material from which greatness can be forged if you learn to use it instead of letting it use you. Being a high-value man is not about the car you drive, the money in your account, or how many people clap for you when you walk into a room. Those are side effects, not foundations. The foundation of a high-value man is the ability to take pain, the betrayals, the failures, the humiliation, the loneliness, and transform it into something unbreakable. Neuroscience has shown us that when the brain experiences deep emotional pain, the amygdala and prefrontal cortex light up in ways similar to physical injury. The brain literally processes heartbreak like a broken bone. But here's the beauty. The human brain is neuroplastic. That means your experiences, even the painful ones, are not permanent prisons. They are clay, and clay can be reshaped if you have the courage to put your hands in it. I've seen men who were destroyed by rejection never recover, living the rest of their lives as bitter shadows of themselves because they never chose to confront the rawness inside them. And I've seen men take rejection, betrayal, even the sting of public humiliation, and turn it into fire that powered their greatest victories. What made the difference? It wasn't the pain, it was the decision. Pain will either shrink you or expand you, depending on whether you choose to run from it or to meet it head on. Think about the greatest transformations in history. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison. 27 years robbed of his freedom, his family, his future. Most men would have come out broken, bitter, resentful. He came out stronger, sharper, more powerful than ever because he learned to turn isolation into inner mastery. That is the essence of a high-value man, the ability to alchemize suffering into strength. But let me bring this closer to you. Many of you here today have been through hell, failed businesses, broken families, betrayals by people you loved, the shame of not being the man you thought you'd be by now. And you've asked yourself silently, am I enough? Do I even matter? These questions are not signs of weakness. They are the doorway to transformation. High-value men don't avoid those questions. They wrestle with them until they emerge with answers that give them fire. From a neuroscientific perspective, every time you face pain, instead of numbing it, you strengthen your prefrontal cortex, your seat of decision-making, impulse control, and long-term planning. You literally rewire your brain to become more resilient. When you numb pain with distractions, scrolling endlessly, drinking, shallow validation, you are not escaping it, you're reinforcing weakness. You're teaching your brain that you cannot handle reality. But when you confront it, breathe through it, and ask, what can I build from this? You teach your nervous system that you are in control, not the pain. That is how transformation begins, not with external success, but with internal rewiring. Now, don't get me wrong, pain will never feel good. Stop expecting it to. Stop fantasizing about a life where you feel no struggle, no hardship, no heartbreak. That's not life. That's death with oxygen. Growth requires resistance. Muscles only grow by tearing, bones only harden through stress. Diamonds only form under pressure. The same laws of biology and physics apply to your character. Without pain, you remain soft, brittle, forgettable. With pain and the courage to embrace it, you become forged, unbreakable, undeniable. I remember counseling a young man who had lost everything. His business collapsed, his fiancée left him, and he was living in his car. He told me he wanted to die, that the shame was unbearable. I told him something most people wouldn't. Good. Sit with it. Don't run from the pain. Feel every ounce of it until it cuts you open. Because that pain is carving out space inside you for greatness. But only if you decide to use it. Years later, he built a multi-million-dollar company, not because he wanted money, but because he decided that the pain of his lowest moment would fuel every decision he made. He refused to waste his suffering. That is what separates men who crumble from men who rise. High-value men don't ask life to be easy. They demand of themselves to be strong. They understand that every wound, every scar, every failure is a lesson written on the body of their soul. And the man who reads those lessons without excuses, without self-pity, becomes unstoppable. Whoa! But let's get practical. How do you actually transform pain into power? First, you stop lying to yourself. You admit the pain is real. Too many men hide behind fake strength, behind bravado, behind, I'm fine. No, you're not fine. You're broken. You're bleeding, and that's okay, because once you admit it, you can do something with it. Second, you frame the pain as fuel. Neuroscience calls this cognitive reappraisal, the ability to reinterpret negative experiences as opportunities for growth. Instead of saying, this broke me, you say, this forged me. Third, you use the energy of that pain to take action. Action is the antidote to despair. Every rep in the gym, every page of a book, every hour of work, every difficult conversation, you take the raw energy of pain and you redirect it into progress. You see, the brain doesn't distinguish much between physical and emotional stress. What matters is what you do with it. Exercise, focus, hard work, these rewire the brain's pain pathways into growth pathways. That's why the men who transform pain into power don't waste time wallowing. They move, they act, they build. And here's something you need to hear. Being a high-value man doesn't mean you don't feel pain. It means you refuse to be owned by it. It means when life cuts you, you use the blood to paint your masterpiece. It means when people doubt you, you use their doubt as fuel. It means when you fall, you refuse to stay down. Some of you are sitting here today at your breaking point. You've lost something you thought you couldn't live without. You failed at something you thought defined you. You've been betrayed by someone you trusted, and you think that means your value has decreased. But let me tell you the truth. Your value doesn't come from the absence of pain. It comes from what you build from it. The man who has never been broken cannot be trusted. The man who has been broken and rebuilt himself is unstoppable. And when you become that man, when you've taken the raw weight of suffering and turned it into muscle, into steel, into fire, something extraordinary happens. People can feel it when you walk into a room. You no longer need to prove yourself because your presence carries the authority of someone who has faced hell and returned stronger. That is what high value is. Not money, not status, not superficial dominance. True high value is earned in the furnace of pain. Now let me take you deeper, because this isn't just philosophy, it's biology. When you face pain, your body releases cortisol, the stress hormone. If you run from pain, cortisol lingers, slowly poisoning you, weakening your immune system, shrinking your brain's hippocampus, the very part responsible for memory and learning. That's why men who drown their pain in distraction become weaker, more anxious, more forgetful. But when you face pain head on, your body learns to metabolize that cortisol more effectively. You literally become healthier, sharper, more capable. Pain confronted becomes power embodied. And here's the final truth. You don't get to choose whether you experience pain. Life will hand it to you whether you want it or not. The only choice you have is whether you let it destroy you or whether you make it your fuel. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to remember this tonight. The men who change history, the men who inspire generations, the men who leave a legacy, they are not the ones who avoided pain. They are the ones who turned it into greatness. Your pain is your power. Your scars are your armor. Your suffering is your strength. Stop running, stop numbing, stop waiting for someone to save you. Use it, transform it, and become the high-value man you were meant to be. When I left off, I told you that pain is not optional, but transformation is. Now, I want to push you deeper into this truth, because too many men stop halfway. They recognize their pain, they try to frame it positively, but they don't commit to the full transformation. They treat pain like a visitor, not a teacher. They patch it up instead of letting it reshape them. That is why so many remain stuck in cycles of mediocrity. They keep reliving the same wounds because they never allowed those wounds to harden into wisdom. Think about a broken bone. If left unattended, it heals improperly, weak, fragile, vulnerable to breaking again. But when it is reset, painfully, deliberately, it heals stronger. The same is true for the man who resets his life after being shattered. If you refuse the reset, if you avoid the discipline, you limp through life repeating the same patterns. But if you accept the pain of the reset, if you choose to rebuild with precision and discipline, you come out tougher than before. This isn't poetic metaphor. It's hard biology. The calluses on your skin are proof. The thickened muscle fibers after stress are proof. Your nervous system adapts to what it survives. The problem today is that most men are afraid of the reset, afraid of silence, of solitude, of sitting with their wounds long enough to understand them. We live in a culture addicted to distraction, where the moment a man feels pain, he escapes into noise, into shallow entertainment, into toxic relationships, into substances, into digital illusions. But no high-value man was ever built in the refuge of escape. He was built in the silence of confrontation. He was built in the nights when there was no one to call, no one to lean on, when the only voice he could hear was his own. And he chose to listen. And let me tell you something uncomfortable. Your pain is not unique. You are not the only man betrayed by someone you loved, not the only one who failed at a business, not the only one humiliated, abandoned, rejected. But what can make you unique is your response. Most men break and stay broken. A rare few break and rebuild stronger. And the rarest of all use their pain not just to elevate themselves, but to elevate the world around them. That is true high value. When your transformation becomes the catalyst for others to rise. I once studied combat veterans who came home shattered by trauma. Many fell into despair, addiction, and self-destruction. But some, against all odds, channeled that trauma into leadership, into mentorship, into building organizations that saved lives. Neurological scans revealed that their brains had developed greater connectivity between the amygdala, responsible for fear, and the prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational decision-making. In other words, the very trauma that could have destroyed them instead gave them heightened emotional control and sharper judgment. Their suffering became the very tool that made them exceptional leaders. That is what pain can do when you refuse to waste it. Now let's talk about something men often misunderstand: emotions. Too many of you were taught that being a man means suppressing emotions. Don't cry, don't feel, don't show weakness. But suppression is not strength, it is corrosion. The suppressed emotion doesn't vanish, it festers, it leaks out as rage, as bitterness, as passive aggression, as self-destruction. A high-value man doesn't suppress emotions, he masters them. He feels them fully, processes them, and then directs them like a weapon. Anger, when mastered, becomes fuel for discipline. Sadness, when understood, becomes a doorway to empathy and depth. Fear, when harnessed, sharpens focus and readiness. Pain, when owned, becomes raw power. This is not philosophy, it's neurochemistry. When you acknowledge emotions, your brain integrates them into memory and meaning, reducing their destructive power. When you suppress them, your amygdala stays hyperactive, flooding your system with cortisol and adrenaline, trapping you in fight or flight mode. Suppression makes you reactive, mastery makes you powerful. That's why I tell men, don't run from emotions, learn their language, translate them into action. That is how you turn pain into power. Some of you might be asking, but how do I actually do this in real life? Let me paint the picture. Your wife leaves. Your business partner steals from you. Your so-called friends mock you behind your back. The old you feels anger, shame, bitterness. That's natural. But the high value you stops and says, this is fuel. You go to the gym, not to escape, but to embody strength. You study relentlessly, not to distract, but to sharpen your mind. You build again, not out of spite, but out of a refusal to stay broken. You take every ounce of betrayal and turn it into momentum. When people see you later, they don't see a victim. They see a man who is forged. That presence cannot be faked, cannot be bought, cannot be replicated. It is earned in the crucible of pain. You want to know why high-value men are rare? Because most men want shortcuts. They want the respect without the scars, the admiration without the work, the authority without the suffering. But life doesn't work that way. Authority is born from survival. Respect is commanded by scars. Value is forged in struggle. When you see a man who walks into a room and people instinctively listen, it is not because of his suit or his car. It is because, consciously or not, people can feel that this man has endured fire and did not collapse. Pain leaves an imprint, not just on the soul, but on the very way you carry yourself. your tone of voice, your posture, your eyes, they all tell the truth of your suffering. And when you've transformed that suffering into power, people can sense it. That is why high-value men don't need to scream for respect. They embody it. Let me take you into something most men never understand: the relationship between resilience and meaning. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor, wrote that suffering without meaning is despair, but suffering with meaning is strength. Neuroscience confirms this. When people frame their pain as purposeful, their brains release dopamine, the neurotransmitter of motivation. In other words, if you can find a reason inside your suffering, your brain literally rewards you with energy to endure. That's why men who have a mission, whether to protect their family, build their legacy, or serve a cause, can withstand pain that would crush others. Without meaning, pain is torture. With meaning, pain is fuel. So I challenge you, what meaning are you assigning to your pain? Are you telling yourself it's proof you're a failure? Or are you telling yourself it's proof you're being forged? That choice alone can determine the entire trajectory of your life. Some of you are living small because you've allowed pain to convince you that you are small. But hear me clearly. Pain is not there to shrink you. It is there to carve out space inside you for power. You are not broken. You are being built. Every man who ever mattered, every man whose name lives beyond his years, was carved by pain. They bled, they broke, they suffered, but they decided to use it. That decision is available to you right now, tonight, in this very moment. And here is where the journey becomes spiritual as much as biological. When you transform pain into power, you do more than change your brain chemistry, more than build resilience. You align yourself with the deepest law of existence. Nothing wasted, everything used. Nature wastes nothing. Death becomes soil, storms feed rivers, destruction clears the way for rebirth. The same must be true for you. If nature wastes nothing, why should you waste your suffering? Ladies and gentlemen, I tell you this not as theory, but as truth carved from life itself. The man you are today is not the man you must remain. Pain is your raw material. Power is your destiny. The fire you have endured is not proof of your weakness, but the invitation to strength. And the world is desperate for men who accept that invitation. Families need them, communities need them, history needs them. High-value men are not born, they are built. And they are built in the furnace of pain. You have been in that furnace. The question is, will you let it consume you, or will you emerge carrying fire in your hands? That choice is yours, always yours. And the time to choose is now.